I sat in the front pew of the church, my hands folded neatly in my lap, staring at the polished mahogany coffin at the altar. My mother was inside. A woman I had spent my entire life trying to impress. A woman who in the end had made it painfully clear that I was never enough. Tears pricked at the edges of my vision, but they weren't for grief. They were for closure, the kind I knew I'd never truly get. Beside me, my sister Leah sniffled dramatically, dabbing at her eyes with a lace-trimmed handkerchief. She always had a way of, even in this solemn moment, she managed to draw the eye. As the priest concluded his final blessing, Leah released a soft, pitiful sob, leaning into her husband Alexander, who enveloped her in a comforting embrace. She looked flawless as always. Her designer black dress accentuated her figure perfectly, and her blonde curls cascaded in elegant waves. Even at a funeral, she commanded the spotlight. I swallowed hard, my throat tight, and turned my gaze to the second row, where my aunt and uncle sat rigidly, deliberately avoiding my eyes, a sentiment echoed by the rest of the attendees. Family. They all knew. I had steeled myself for what lay ahead, convincing myself that I would remain unaffected. Yet nothing could have readied me for the lawyer's words that followed the service. "I'm sorry, Nova," Mr. Holloway said, adjusting his glasses as he rifled through the pages of my mother's will. "Your parents left everything to Leah." A cold numbness enveloped me. "Everything?" I managed to ask, my voice surprisingly steady. He hesitated before continuing. "Your parents believed you were independent enough and didn't need. Financial support was a necessity for Leah, a stay-at-home mother who required assistance." My nails dug into the fabric of my dress as I observed her situation. Leah owned 3 properties, had a husband earning 6 figures, and luxury cars graced her driveway. Yet here I was, having worked my way through college, juggling 2 jobs, and never once seeking help from my parents, deemed unworthy. "That's ridiculous," Aunt Marlene muttered under her breath, finally breaking the tense silence. But Leah appeared unfazed, letting out a delicate sigh as if this was merely another unfortunate burden she had to bear. "I mean, it does make sense," she murmured, placing a hand over mine as if she were offering comfort. "You've always been so independent, Nova. Mom and Dad just wanted to help me, that's all." I pulled my hand away. "You knew, didn't you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She bit her lip. They may have mentioned something before." And there it was, the truth. I wanted to scream, to rage, to demand how, even after death, my parents still found a way to remind me that I wasn't good enough. Enough. Years of being the overlooked daughter had taught me one thing: anger wouldn't change anything. So instead I smiled. If they thought I was independent before, they had no idea what I was capable of now. I turned to the lawyer. "Thank you for your time," I said smoothly, standing up and gathering my purse. "But I won't be contesting the will." Leah's brow furrowed. "Wait, you're not mad?" I gave her a long, measured look before tilting my head. "Oh, Liv," I murmured, stepping closer so only she could hear. "I don't need their money." Her shoulders sagged in relief, mistaking my words for surrender. I turned on my heel and walked out of that office with my head held high. What Leah didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I had already prepared my own final gift for our dear parents, and it would be unforgettable. I wasn't always invisible to my parents, at least I don't think I was. There must have been a time, maybe when I was a toddler, clutching at my mother's skirt or babbling nonsense to my father, when they saw me. It was evident that the contrast between Leah and me became increasingly pronounced as I matured. She was the beloved daughter, the one who could do no wrong, while I faded into the background. It began subtly. When Leah triumphed in her first dance recital at 6, my parents celebrated with a lavish party and a cake shaped like ballet slippers. In contrast, when I excelled in a spelling bee that same year, my mother merely patted my head and encouraged me to keep striving. By the time Leah turned 16, she received a shiny new car, adorned with a big red bow, while I remained in the shadows. When I turned 16, I received a used bike, a reflection of my quiet existence. I reassured myself that the lack of approval, admiration, or love didn't matter, yet the sting lingered beneath the surface. While Leah glided effortlessly through life, buoyed by charm and parental favoritism, I toiled diligently to carve out my own path. I juggled 2 part-time jobs to finance my college education, eventually securing a stable career in finance. I saved diligently and invested wisely, never relying on anyone. Yet, in the end, it all felt inconsequential as I sat alone in my tiny apartment. Night enveloped me as I lay staring at the ceiling, the words echoing relentlessly in my mind. "Your parents left everything to Leah." Of course they did. Why would I expect anything different? My phone buzzed, jolting me from my reverie, a message from Aunt Marlene. Nova, I just want you to know I think what your parents did was disgusting. You deserve better. A moment later, another message chimed in. You should fight this contest, the will. It's not fair. Fair. The word struck me as absurd, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Nothing about my relationship with my parents had ever been fair. Had ever been fair, I had accepted that a long time ago. But what I couldn't accept was Leah sitting there, feigning that this was merely another unfortunate inconvenience for her. She acted as if she hadn't known I didn't want their money, yet that didn't mean I wouldn't leave my own mark on their legacy. I pulled open my laptop and logged into my email. There was someone I needed to reach out to, a certain lawyer. A week later, I stood in front of my parents' house, no Leah's house now. It still smelled the same freshly cut grass. The lingering scent of my mother's lavender perfume clung to the walls, yet the space no longer felt like home. It hadn't for quite some time. When Leah answered the door, her face brightened with surprise. Nova, I wasn't expecting you. Of course she wasn't. I need to pick up some things, I replied, keeping it simple. Mom had some personal letters and keepsakes I'd like to have. Leah hesitated for a moment but then stepped aside, gesturing for me to enter. Of course, take whatever you need. I moved through the house slowly, memories pressing against me with each step. The room where I had witnessed my parents showering Leah with admiration, the dining table where I had once remained silent as they extolled her latest achievements. I made my way to my father's old study. This was my purpose. I pulled open the desk drawer, my fingers brushing against aged documents, notebooks, and letters. And then I discovered it, the original copy of my parents' will. I had already encountered the version the lawyer had read aloud, but this was distinct, for there on the first page lay a clause that had not been mentioned. In the final document, there was a clause indicating that my parents' estate was to be divided evenly between Leah and me. I exhaled slowly, my fingers tightening around the paper. So Leah had done more than merely accept the favoritism. She had altered the will. My heart raced as I turned to face her. Leah stood in the doorway, arms crossed. You weren't supposed to see that, she said, her voice calm, almost indifferent. I stared at her, waiting for an explanation, a confession, anything. Instead, she simply shrugged. Mom and Dad always intended for. It was all about ensuring their wishes were fulfilled, Nova. In that moment, my disdain for her reached new heights. I could have unleashed my fury, could have confronted her, could have stormed into a lawyer's office and revealed her true nature. But I chose a different path. Instead, I offered a smile, my voice unwavering as I expressed my gratitude for her honesty. That was all I needed to hear. With that, I exited the house, already strategizing my next move. Leah had just made a grave error. She underestimated me, believing I was still the same girl who would simply let this slide. She had always been in the shadows, but soon she would discover the depth of her misconceptions. The truth lay hidden, nestled within my father's desk, patiently awaiting my discovery. My parents had planned to divide their estate between Leah and me, yet Leah had orchestrated a different fate, ensuring that their intentions remained unfulfilled. She hadn't merely embraced her status as the golden child, she had seized everything, leaving me with nothing. She assumed I would continue my pattern of acceptance, of swallowing my disappointment and moving forward. Little did she know the strength of the resolve she was up against. I devoted the following week to strategizing. I could have approached a lawyer, could have contested the will in court, but legal disputes were convoluted and protracted. Leah, by this point, had become adept at safeguarding her interests. I had no doubt she had meticulously concealed her maneuvers. No, this called for a different approach, one that would strike at her core. I just needed the right ally to assist me. I discovered him in a dimly lit bar downtown, where the air was thick with the lingering aroma of whiskey embedded in the wooden walls. Hello, Alexander, I said, sliding into the booth across from Leah's husband. Alexander caught his attention, and he looked up, startled. He hadn't expected to see me. Nova, he frowned, setting down his drink. What are you doing here? I folded my hands on the table. I know about the will. His entire body went still. What? I leaned in, keeping my voice low. I know Leah changed it. I found the version in Dad's study. My parents wanted me to have half of everything, but Leah made sure that didn't happen. Alexander let out a slow breath, rubbing a hand over his face. He didn't look surprised. You knew, I said. It wasn't. A question escaped him with a sigh. I sensed his hesitation as he gazed into his glass. But Leah, he continued. She controls everything: the finances, the house, the accounts. I don't ask questions anymore. It was clear he had resigned himself to her dominance in their marriage. He was merely a passenger on this journey. Yet, I wasn't here to pass judgment on Alexander. My purpose was different. Listen, I said, my tone softening. I don't care about the money. I never have. Alexander let out a derisive snort. Leah thinks you do. Leah thinks a lot of things, I replied. But she's wrong. I leaned in closer. I don't seek her money. I merely desire her to face the consequences of her actions. Alexander scrutinized me for what felt like an eternity before. To my astonishment, he chuckled. God, I'd love to see that, he murmured, shaking his head. But Leah, she always wins. Nova, she's untouchable. Not this time, I replied, confident in a secret Leah was oblivious to, one I was poised to exploit. Over the next week, I delved into the facade of Leah's flawless existence. My interest lay not in her financial records or property deeds, but in something far more intimate, and it didn't take long to uncover. Late one night, as I scrolled through old social media posts, I stumbled upon a picture from 3 years ago. A vacation Leah had taken to Italy with a group of friends. The issue was that Alexander had never been on that trip. I clicked on the tag names and one caught my eye. A man named David Carlisle. He wasn't merely a friend, he was something much more. I delved into his account, clicking through old comments and interactions, and there it was. A thread of flirtatious remarks, inside jokes, and late-night messages that spanned years. Leah had the cafe, my heart racing with anticipation. I had laid the groundwork, and now it was time for the pieces to fall into place. The thrill of the game was intoxicating, each moment charged with unspoken tension. As I approached, I could see the confusion etched on his face, a mixture of concern and curiosity. I took a deep breath, ready to reveal the truth that would shatter the facade. This was my moment, the culmination of careful planning and quiet observation. I slid into the seat across from him, the air thick with unspoken words. You wanted to talk, I said, my voice steady as I prepared to unveil the reality that would change everything. A quiet cafe on the edge of town. He was already there when I arrived, hunched over a cup of coffee, staring blankly at the table. The moment he looked up and saw me, I knew he had seen everything. I slid into the chair across from him, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us was thick with something fragile, anger, disbelief, maybe even relief. How long? He finally asked, his voice hoarse. I exhaled. From what I found, at least 4 years. Alexander let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. Of course he picked up his coffee, but his hands trembled too much to take a sip. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, I said, and for once I truly meant it. No, you're not. His eyes locked onto mine. You wanted me to know. You wanted this to happen. I didn't deny it. Yes, but only because Leah deserved to be exposed. Exposed? She's been playing everyone, Alexander, you, me, even my parents, right up until they died. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. And now what? What do you want from me, Nova? I lean forward. I don't. I seek your money, not your sympathy. I yearn to witness her world unravel. Alexander regarded me intently, a small, dark smile gradually forming on his lips. You're not the only one. We spent nearly an hour dissecting every detail, Leah's manipulations, her lies, the forged will. Alexander's anger simmered, not explosive but icy and measured, the kind that heralds destruction. Finally, he declared, his voice unwavering, I want a divorce and I want full custody of the kids. It was a daring move, meticulously planned. Strike. Leah had dedicated years to crafting the perfect image, a loving wife, a devoted mother. That image was essential to her, and Alexander was poised to shatter it. The following morning, I observed from a distance as Alexander's lawyer approached Leah's doorstep with the divorce papers. She answered the door clad in a silk robe, her hair impeccably styled, a steaming cup of coffee cradled in her hands. Yet, the instant her eyes fell upon the envelope, her expression contorted into something grotesque. I longed to hear her reaction, the shock, the panic, but all I could do was watch. She observed as her fingers clenched the papers, knuckles turning white. For a fleeting moment, her gaze drifted, not to Alexander, not to her children, but to the neighbors. Their opinions mattered more to her than the disintegration of her marriage unfolding before her. Classic Leah. I should have stepped back, let Alexander deal with the aftermath, but I wasn't ready to let go. Leah still believed she could steer the narrative, that she could twist her way out of this predicament as she had done countless times before. She was mistaken. In the evening, I took decisive action with just a few clicks, uploading the irrefutable proof of her affair, screenshots, messages, pictures. But I didn't send them to Alexander. Instead, I shared them with her entire social circle, her mommy group chats, the charity board members, even the homeowners association. Everyone who mattered to her was in the loop. The fallout was swift and unforgiving. Leah's phone erupted with calls and messages. Initially, she attempted to deny it, to weave some narrative of misunderstanding, but the evidence was overwhelming. By the next morning, she had become a pariah, shunned by the friends she had nurtured for years. Cultivating a sense of isolation, Leah found herself abandoned, grappling with a profound loneliness for the first time. Individuals like her often operate under the delusion that consequences are foreign to them. They weave lies, manipulate circumstances, and contort the truth to align with their own narrative. In their minds, they are invincible, convinced that fortune will always smile upon them. But this time I ensured that wouldn't be the case. A week after I revealed the evidence of her affair, Leah began to unravel. Her once loyal friends severed ties, and the school moms turned their backs on her. Whispers trailed behind her at the drop-offs. The charity board where she once held dominion had requested her resignation. And the most devastating blow of all, Alexander had left, taking the children with him. She had lost it all. Yet, Leah was not one to surrender without a fight. She still had one final card to play. I was at work when her call came through. I hesitated, tempted to let her wallow in the chaos she had created, but a part of me craved to hear her side. I picked up on the third ring. "You ruined my life," she said, her voice raw and trembling. "Unrecognizable," I said calmly. "No, Leah, you did that all on your own." She let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "You think you're so clever, don't you? You think you've won." "I don't need to win," I replied. "I just needed the truth to come out." She fell silent for a long moment, then her voice dropped to something colder. "You don't understand, man. Andy, you think you've taken everything from me? Fine. But you better watch your back because I have nothing left to lose." With that, she hung up. A normal person might have been scared, but I knew. Leah was all talk, yet I remained vigilant, unwilling to lower my guard just yet. Though she had lost her reputation, her marriage, and her perfect image, one thing still remained: the house. Money wasn't my motivation, but I was determined to see this through. So, I reached out to Alexander. "Do you still have the original will?" I inquired. "Yeah," he replied, confusion lacing his voice. I smiled, knowing it was time to rectify what Leah had shattered. Weeks passed, but eventually my lawyer filed the case regarding the fraudulent alterations Leah had made. Legal documents revealed a serious crime. The evidence was overwhelming, and with Alexander's statement, she stood no chance. The court ruled in my favor, reinstating my parents' original wishes, which meant half of everything, including the house, now belonged to me. I'll never forget the look on Leah's face when the sheriff arrived with the eviction notice. "You can't do this," she screamed, her voice shrill with rage. "This is my house." "Not anymore," I replied, standing in the doorway. "You took everything from me, Leah, and now I'm just reclaiming what was rightfully mine." She trembled, her hands balled into fists. "Where am I supposed to go?" she whispered, her eyes filled with desperation. I tilted my head, responding, "I guess you'll have to learn to be independent now." With the sweetest smile I could muster, I handed her one final gift. An old used bicycle, the very same kind my parents had given me for my 16th birthday. I turned and walked back inside, shutting the door behind me, leaving her standing there alone. For the first time in her life, Leah found herself without anyone to lean on. For the first time in my life, I experienced a profound sense of freedom. The house, once filled with noise, was quiet at last. I wandered through its halls, no longer burdened by the feeling of being an outsider. Gone were the judgmental stares and the hushed conversations that highlighted my differences from Leah. This space was mine now, not merely in a legal sense but in every meaningful way. Yet, as I stood in the grand living room, surrounded by opulent furniture and meticulously arranged decor, I felt an emptiness. This place had never been a home to me. It had been a battleground. It stood as a symbol of all that had been withheld from me, and clarity washed over me regarding my next steps. The very next day, I placed the house on the market, not for profit nor for revenge, but to carve out a clean slate. This house had been Leah's kingdom, a shrine erected by my parents in honor of their perfect daughter, and I sought to distance myself from it. I observed from afar as the for sale sign was driven into the lawn, and for the first time in my life, I felt not as though I was losing something, but rather as if I were winning. Leah, however, was not sharing in this sentiment. Faring so well, I heard from mutual acquaintances that she was struggling. Alexander had won full custody, and without him to bankroll her lifestyle, things unraveled fast. The last time I saw her, she was renting a cramped apartment on the outskirts of town, working a low-level job she despised. For once, there was no safety net. No parents to bail her out, no adoring social circle to prop her up. She was finally living the kind of life she had always looked down on, but the funny thing was I didn't feel triumphant. I felt no guilt. I simply felt complete. The money I received from my parents' estate was largely donated, not out of spite, but because I had forged my own path without their assistance. Their wealth did not define me. I retained just enough to begin anew in a different city, a different life, where I would no longer be known as Nova, the forgotten daughter, but simply as Nova. A week before my departure, Aunt Marlene invited me for dinner. She had been the only relative who truly supported me through it all. As we sat at the table, she reached for my hand, a gentle smile gracing her lips. "Your parents were wrong about you," she said softly. I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh, they always thought you were the one who didn't need them, that you were too strong, too independent. But the truth is, they needed you." I frowned, confusion washing over me. "What do you mean?" She sighed, her gaze distant. "They built their entire world around Leah because she needed to be propped up. She craved their validation, their money, their constant approval. But you thrived despite them, and that scared them." The weight of her words settled deep inside me. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps my parents had never overlooked me due to a lack of worthiness. Maybe they had simply recognized that I didn't require them in the same way Leah did. For the first time, that realization brought no pain. As I gathered the final remnants of my belongings, I cast one last glance at my childhood room. The girl who once inhabited this space, who spent countless years striving for validation, was no longer here. In her stead stood a woman liberated from the need to prove herself. I picked up my bag, stepped through the door, and never looked back. I glanced back, for my past did not define me. It was my future that held the true essence of who I am.